Good morning, and welcome to Prince William Forest Park. I'm Mary Thompson, an interpretive naturalist here at Prince William Forest Park, where I've given programs and hikes for 3 years. Here at Prince William Forest Park, just 35 miles south of the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., we have 15,000 acres of Piedmont forest, and we're the largest contiguous Piedmont forest ecosystem in the National Park Service. With 15,000 acres of trees, it should be no surprise that we have a thriving bird population here in our park, including 7 species of my favorite birds, the woodpeckers. Of course, woodpeckers are birds. Worldwide, there are about 10,000 species of birds. 200 of those are woodpeckers. Woodpeckers are found on every continent except Australia and Antarctica. Like all birds, they have feathers, wings, beaks, and they lay eggs. But at the same time, woodpeckers have 3 unique characteristics that make them different than other birds, and they also make unique contributions to their ecosystems and their communities. The first unique characteristic of woodpeckers is that they can climb tree trunks. Surprisingly few birds do this. Here in Northern Virginia, only nuthatches and brown creepers also climb tree trunks. While nuthatches and brown creepers, both very small birds, can go headfirst down as well as up a tree, the woodpeckers can only climb up. They climb up the tree, then fly back down and climb up again. Now, woodpeckers cling to the trunks of trees for 2 reasons. One is so they can excavate their nest holes, which we will talk more about later, but they also do it in order to find their favorite foods: ants, beetle larvae, caterpillars, hiding in the crevices of the tree bark. They are able to climb the trees because of their zygodactyl feet. Now, zygodactyl is just a fancy word meaning they have 2 toes pointed forwards and 2 toes pointed backwards. Parrots and a few owls also have this unique kind of foot, but most birds have 3 toes forward and 1 toe back. This toe arrangement and their long, sharp claws are what enable them to cling to the trunks of trees. Another characteristic that makes woodpeckers unique is their stiff tail that functions as a brace while they're climbing. You can see that the tail is pointed, and I can tell you from experience that the shafts of these tail feathers are extraordinarily thick and stiff compared to other bird tails. Woodpeckers don't use their tails and feet to climb up tree trunks the way you or I might climb up stairs or a ladder, 1 foot at a time, using their tail for balance. What they do is brace themselves with these stiff tails, then kind of hop with both feet and cling a bit further up so that they hitch their way up the tree. So there's a brief moment in time when the tail is the only part of their body in contact with the tree. Now imagine you are climbing a tree. Could you let go of the tree with both hands, supported by only, say, 1 foot against the trunk? The third unique feature that makes woodpeckers unique is their long, sticky tongues. The tongue has barbs on the end to help them spear their favorite insects. Picture a frog catching a fly. The woodpecker catches its dinner in much the same way. Even more fascinating, though, is that the tongue can be up to 3 times the length of the beak. Where do they store such a long tongue? The tongue actually divides in 2 at the back of the throat, goes around the spine, slides between the skin of the head and the bone of the skull, over the top of the skull, and is attached to the skull between the bird's eyes. If you part the feathers on the back of the bird's head, you can actually see the tongue running beneath the skin. So those are the 3 characteristics of woodpeckers that make them unique birds: their zygodactyl feet, their stiff tails, and their long, sticky tongues. Now, I mentioned that there are 7 species of woodpeckers here in Prince William Forest Park. So which ones are they? Here are all 7 arranged according to size: the downy, the yellow-bellied sapsucker, the hairy, the red-headed, the red-bellied, the northern flicker, and the pileated. Now, worldwide, the smallest woodpecker is the picklet at about 3 inches, which is half the size of our downy, and the largest is the imperial at 18 inches, which is just a bit larger than the pileated. The downy and hairy woodpeckers are common backyard birds and will often come to feeders. I see them almost every day at my bird feeders. As you can see, they are very similar in appearance, and it can be tricky telling them apart, especially when you don't have them side by side as we do here on this image on the upper right. There are two main differences though. One is body size. The hairy, which is on the right in this image, is larger than the downy on the left. The other is the relative size of the beak compared to the head. The downy has a very short beak compared to the width of its head, while the hairy has a much longer, thicker beak compared to its head. Telling the males and females apart is a bit easier. As is the case in most birds, the male is a bit more colorful. In both the downy and the hairy, the male has a patch of red on the back of its head, and the female does not have the patch of red. The yellow-bellied sapsucker is the most migratory of all of our woodpeckers, spending the summer north in Canada and Alaska, and spending its winters in Virginia and the southeastern United States. It's more common to see the evidence that it's been here than it is to see the bird itself. Have you ever seen rows and columns of small holes in the bark of trees? That's the work of the yellow-bellied sapsucker. It drills these holes to get the tree sap, which is a rich source of sugars. Not only does the sapsucker drink from the sap wells, but other animals will come behind him and drink it as well. The red-headed woodpeckers are unique among woodpeckers for a couple of reasons. First, the male and female both have the signature red head, and there's no way to tell them apart in the field. Second, because they live in family colonies where the adolescent birds help care for their younger brothers and sisters. A couple of years ago, there was a colony of red-headed woodpeckers living along South Valley Trail just south of Oak Ridge Campground on the north side of Scenic Drive here at Prince William Forest Park. The red-bellied woodpecker is another common backyard or feeder bird. Its distinguishing mark is the red streak on top of its head, much like a red mohawk haircut. Both the male and female red-bellied woodpeckers have the red mohawk, but the male's red streak comes all the way down to the beak, while the female stops just above the eyes. The northern flicker is also unique among the woodpeckers for several reasons. One is its coloring. Where our other woodpeckers are black and white, the flicker is tan and black. Also, both the male and female have the red on the back of the head, but only the male has the black mustache, which allows us to tell them apart in the field. Finally, it spends more time foraging on the ground rather than up and down the trunks of trees, as most woodpeckers do. They may occasionally be seen in a backyard, but it's not very common. And finally, our largest woodpecker in the United States, the pileated woodpecker. Now, some people say pileated, some people say pileated, both are correct. This bird is the inspiration for woody woodpecker, and is distinctive not only because of its size, but by the large, brilliant red crest on its head. It also has a very distinctive call. That sound has always reminded me of a monkey in the jungle, but that's our pileated woodpecker. As for telling the male from the female, here you can see that the male has a red mustache and the female does not. There's at least one mated pair of pileated woodpeckers living in Prince William Forest Park, and they're most often seen in the middle of the park around Turkey Run Educational Center. As I said earlier, not only do the woodpeckers have several unique characteristics, the zygodactyl foot, the stiff tail, and the long tongue, but they also make important contributions to the forest ecology. Now, I've already mentioned the first of these, which is the sap wells created by the yellow-bellied sapsucker. Not only does the sapsucker drink the sap, but other animals come along and drink it too. The wells do eventually dry up, and the sapsucker comes back from time to time and reopens them. Creating food caches is another way that woodpeckers contribute to the forest community. This is the acorn woodpecker, and he doesn't live in Virginia, but I like to talk about him because he's an extreme example of what all woodpeckers can do. The acorn woodpecker drills holes and fills them with acorns. Other animals, such as squirrels, can then come behind him and raid his stores when resources are scarce. Woodpeckers in our area do similar things with nut seeds or insects. They might capture a caterpillar, for example, in one tree, then take it to another and stash it for later. The cache of dead insects could then be raided by another animal, especially in the winter if food resources are scarce. Finally, woodpeckers contribute to the forest community by abandoning their nest holes or the holes they make while looking for food. Other animals, such as snakes, spiders, and even squirrels, will come behind later and use the holes in mating season to raise their young or as an overnight den. Other cavity-dwelling birds, like chickadees, titmouses, and swallows, depend on these abandoned holes when nesting season comes. If there were no woodpeckers to make these holes, the other cavity-dwelling birds wouldn't be able to nest either. Woodpeckers don't use the same nest holes from year after year. Each year they carve a new hole, usually near the same area previously used, and sometimes in the same tree. They prefer dead trees with soft wood, since they're hitting their heads at about 30 miles an hour against the tree up to 100 times a minute. I'd prefer to hit my head on something soft too. As you may expect, the larger birds, like the pileated, need larger trees because they create larger nest holes. So what is needed is a habitat with large dead trees. The rule of thumb is that it takes a tree about 100 years to grow 12 inches in diameter. And trees don't die of old age as animals do. They have an indefinite lifespan and die only because of external factors such as drought, lightning strikes, disease, or infestation. So you can imagine the difficulty pileated woodpeckers have when looking for a suitable location to excavate a nest hole and raise a family. They need a tree at least a couple of feet across, that is, maybe 200 years old, and that has had the misfortune of being killed. Not only that, there must be other resources around, plenty of ants, beetle larvae, caterpillars, seeds, nuts, and water. Without places like national parks and refuges that are off limits for construction and development, we'd have so few old trees that the woodpeckers wouldn't have any suitable trees for nesting. Unless we maintain our old-growth forest, the pileated might go the way of the ivory-billed woodpecker, which is thought to be distinct due to habitat loss. In order to maintain healthy, thriving populations of woodpeckers and all the other birds and animals that depend on their contributions, it's important that we continue to support the preservation and conservation of forests throughout the United States as habitats for the wildlife that live there. Thank you.